Hello, Bulls fans, and welcome into the CHGO Bulls Podcast with me, Mark K, and my good friend, William. I was going to say your middle name, but I actually don't know what it is. It's Will underscore Gottlieb. That's his middle name. Underscore.
William
William
underscore
is
Gottlieb.
on the
That's on the
road.
birth certificate.
Yeah, well, we might need to put that. We might need to put that in there. But William is on the road. He's on holidays, but because he knows that people just love these HQ editions of CHGO Balls, that they just can't do without it. He wanted to bring his what's his name? His microphone, and wanted to ensure that the people got an episode of CHGO Balls today. So what a great guy William is, as is our producer Joseph Spathis on the ones and twos, doing the thing as he usually does. What a riveting episode of CHGO Balls we have in store for everyone today, William. What are we talking about?
I just noticed that my little tagline still says slop leap, so I think we're a week late on that. But look, I mean, we've had a week here to digest the lack of slop, the lack of moves from Bulls front office. And obviously, I think just in the immediate aftermath, we're all just kind of dumbfounded and trying to figure out how this is happening. But I think with sort of a week to digest, I thought it'd be a kind of a good exercise and um, an important thing to try to wrap our minds around why we think AK is kind of feeling this way, and whether we feel like, if we can really come at this from his perspective, then maybe we'll have a little bit more grounds to criticize the ability to build through the middle. And I think so. Basically, we want to talk about building through the middle. Is that a real feasible thing? And sort of what is the opportunity cost? I think just kind of a fun little exercise here. Not many people are doing that. It's more just kind of screaming and pitchforks and torches.
Yeah. No, I'm glad we're doing this conversation because I'm tired of talking about the same old thing, complaining about the same old thing. There's only so many different ways you can say the same old different thing, and I get it, and it obviously is pertinent and will remain a topic for the remainder of this season, going into off season, potentially even longer, depending on what AK does or doesn't want to do. But yeah, there are other things to talk about. Is the point? So I definitely want to get into that. But before we do, you still got the slop lead there on your what's your name, on your handle here on YouTube. If people are following in, if you're not, jump on the CHGO Sports YouTube and you will see what we're talking about. But there are some quick hitters, some newses that we need to get to first, and then we'll dive into the more broader. We do have some swap. We got some swap for all the casuals out there. But
thank you, Joe,
let's go into
casual,
first.
my accurate. That's much more accurate.
There you go. But we got some slop-age, some Mike Scotto sloppo, if we want to call it that, around Andre Drummond, and some more news in relation to what did or didn't happen at the deadline. I guess it was the dreadline in some respects. But in terms of what didn't materialize at the trade deadline, in relation to Andre Drummond, the Bulls and the 76ers, apparently, per Mike Scotto, the Bulls and Sixers were talking a trade for Andre Drummond to head to Philadelphia. The Bulls wanted 3 second-round picks. The Sixers thought they had a deal in place. The Bulls then didn't do the deal, seemingly, as we all have come to learn, given the fact that Andre Drummond remains on the team. What did you make of this one, William? Was there anything newsy about this? Did you learn anything new about it? I certainly have my thoughts about it, but what do you make of it?
So, I mean, the way that this reads, it's a little bit confusing. Basically, Scotto says that the 76ers believed that they had a deal done for Drummond, and the Bulls wanted 3 second-round picks, and then the Bulls pulled out. So my read on that is that the Sixers were prepared to offer the 3 second-round picks that they ultimately traded for Buddy Hield for Andre Drummond, and then in the final hours, the Bulls pulled out. And to me, again, this is speculation. We can't say for sure that this is how it happened, but to me, like, if you're saying, like, blow me away with an offer, and then you get blown away and you still don't do it, you're just not serious about trading any of these guys. And obviously that was the case. They were not serious about trading any of these guys. We've heard big sort of blow away offers for Alex Caruso that they ultimately declined. And I think as we talk more about sort of the plan and building through the middle, I think it's sort of a good opportunity to think about this through that lens. But to me, like, for a team in this position, you should be looking to accumulate assets, whether or not that comes at the cost of, like, your ceiling, your ultimate ceiling this year, because I don't really believe in the current ceiling of this team. So uh, I would say that's pretty much on par with what I expected a trade to net for Andre Drummond. And clearly, those types of offers were on the table. I probably would have done a 2 second round pick trade for Drummond just because you're probably going to lose him anyway. And so to me, you either really believe in what you've got going on this year or you really believe in your ability to re-sign him longer term. Because otherwise, I think that's a real missed opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny, like we saw the Sixers trade 3 second rounders for Buddy Hield. So I guess the timing of this is also interesting. Like, was this deal in place pre-Buddy Hield, post-Buddy Hield? Like, where does this whole thing fit into the landscape of it? But I guess I got stuck on the wording of this piece around the Bulls asked for 3 second rounders, but Scotto didn't really confirm if the Sixers had agreed to send out 3 second rounders. Maybe they had, maybe they hadn't, but it wasn't really clear from the way the piece was written. So I don't really know if we learnt anything new about this because we all kind of knew that Drummond to the Sixers was a real possibility, that if it was going to happen, it was going to be for a first, it was going to be for several seconds. But yeah, I assuming that this was on the table and that they turned down 3 second round picks, which again is just an assumption because, like I said, that Scotto piece doesn't really confirm it one way or another, then I do kind of think it is ridiculous that we're still talking about Andre Drummond in a Bulls jersey because of what you said, that fact that he is a free agent. You and I have both talked about the impending doom that is coming from a cap situation. So it would beg to suggest that Andre Drummond won't be in Chicago next year. Maybe he will. Maybe if he signs a vet min, but beyond that, if he wants more money, I doubt he will. So I don't know what to make of it. It's a bit of slop, but yeah, I don't know if we necessarily learnt anything new. And again, like another thing Scotto mentioned in there, that was teams like the Lakers, the Suns, and the Rockets were also expressing interest in Andre Drummond. I think the Celtics had some interest before they traded for Xavier Tillman as well. So he was clearly someone that was available or teams were chasing, but for whatever reason, the Bulls, and maybe this connects to the topic we'll touch on later on about building through the middle, they wanted to keep Andre Drummond around, which was interesting. Any more thoughts on Drummond before we move on?
Yeah, just one more thing, because as we kind of tie this back into the building through the middle thing, I mean, if you look at like what's the opportunity cost there, this team, I don't know, maybe we should just say this, but I just feel like this team kind of has done well to draft second round picks. They've gotten Io in the second round. They've gotten Julian Phillips in the second round. They've had some misses too with Marko Simonovic, and they've had misses in the first round. It's not like it's a guarantee, but when you are an older team who's built through, DeMar DeRozan and Nikola Vucevic, and you've got Zach LaVine's contract in the books, you don't really know if you're going to be able to get off of that. You've got Lonzo Ball's money on the books next year. Maybe you can get off of that. But like these second round picks, I think are a lot more valuable because of the new contracts that you're allowed to sign second round picks to. So Julian Phillips right now is making basically half of the veterans minimum for like a 10-year pro.
Yeah.
Those are really team friendly contracts that you can use to build up your roster. And then obviously if they can contribute, great. But I just think, and maybe you don't even use them, but you flip them into something else. Obviously, those picks can be traded for role players. We saw Buddy Hield. We saw what the offers were for Drummond. So I think the opportunity cost of not going that way it tells me that they have a lot of confidence in the current group, which obviously we already know. But I think it also kind of tells me that they just weren't really serious about making any moves. And I think that's kind of the head scratcher, is like, if you're not willing to trade a backup center for 3 second round picks, I just don't know at what point are you going to really start to think about asset accumulation. Even if you are trying to build through the middle, you still need to use those kind of assets to build. And I think that's kind of my biggest disconnect from where this team is going right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, using the Julian Phillips example as well, like he was a second round pick, but they sold off multiple seconds to buy a pick in the 2023 draft, which turned into Julian Phillips. So whether you're using those picks to make a pick in the second round, whether you're using the picks like you noted to go out there and get role players like Andre Drummond, or whether you're using the second round picks to, buy into the second round or buy into other parts of the draft, like they are a valuable asset. So this idea that they're meaningless and not worth anything, I think is wrong. The league is telling us that they are worth something. But look, it is what it is. Let's pivot to Gallinari. I know Dave and Matt touched on this yesterday. We didn't necessarily get your thoughts on it. I don't believe you were on the show yesterday from what I heard. So yeah, keen to get your thoughts on the Bulls' competitive race to land Danilo Gallinari. Didn't get it over the line as such. They weren't ninth, but they were maybe like fourth or fifth in the Gallinari race. Any thoughts, William, about the Bulls going after Gallinari for a second time, but for a second time coming up short?
Well, I think it just goes to show that, like, even though the Bulls are expected to be active on the buyout market, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be getting somebody who can contribute. They've already missed out on Thaddeus Young. They've missed out on Gallinari. They missed out on Delon Wright, who just got bought out today and signed with Miami. Just because they have that roster spot open, and just because they have the ability to absorb a prorated vet min, or maybe a little bit more depending on how Kobe's incentives shake out. We can talk about that if you want. It just shows you that, like, these guys are not necessarily just going to choose you because you have that space. You still have to compete with other teams for what to offer. And so I think I can't remember if it was Shams or Woj last night who said that the Bulls were in the running. Mike Scotto confirmed that, saying the Bulls were before agreeing to the deal with the Bucks. Gallinari drew interest from several teams, including the Clippers, Suns, Cavs, and Bulls. League sources told Hoops Hype. Once Thaddeus Young agreed to join the Suns, Phoenix was out of the equation for Gallinari. Cleveland could not guarantee a role Gallinari sought, while the Bulls aren't actually a contender. So obviously, you have to be able to offer something to these guys. They're not just like going to choose you to sit on the
Yeah.
bench. They're not going to choose you because you have more money to give than other teams, because that's not really how this works either. So just because they have the ability to sign somebody off the buyout market does not necessarily mean that they're going to get someone who can really contribute. Not that buyout market guys really contribute anyway.
Well, I think they can, depending on who they are, and not to suggest that Gallo
I
would
just
have
mean,
been
like,
coming in here.
franchise
Yeah.
changing sort of
No, of
free
course. I
agent
know what you mean.
acquisitions.
But, I consumed all the Pat Bev pills last season, so I think there is scope for it to impact a team. But then you can also point to the Tristan Thompson example as well. So it's not always a savior as such. But to your point, like, if the Bulls are only going to offer a prorated vet min because of the tax concerns, or maybe having to allow a little bit of buffer as well for these Kobe incentives, assuming one or two or three or five of them hit whatever it may be, then if all you can do is offer that vet min, then why would any of these guys sign with the Bulls who are in ninth in the East compared to signing like this the Suns, which Thad Young did? Why would Gallinari choose the Bulls over the Bucks or the Clippers? Like, that were the final two teams that he had in his I guess, or he was deciding over the Bucks or Clippers. Why would he choose the Bulls in that scenario if the money is the same? Like, the Bulls have exceptions to outbid some of these teams if they really wanted to, but they can't really do that because of the tax constraints and the fact that they're acting like the tax line is a hard cap of sorts. Therefore, these guys aren't going to get any. So I guess where mine went, William, straight after this was like, are the Bulls going to get any of these bloody buyout guys? Probably not at this point. Like, again, maybe they'll get one, maybe a Joe Harris or someone like that, assuming Joe Harris doesn't have any better offers out there. But if there is a like for like situation where some of these buyout guys have a deal on the table from a real contender versus a team like the Bulls who are in ninth, and the money is the same, like, the Bulls just can't compete in that market space. So I'm not even sure if they're going to actually fill out the roster anymore and add to the roster, which just means more minutes for Vooch and DeMar and Kobe, and these guys are already burnt out. So, like, that's problematic from this whole competitive thing as well. Like, you didn't do anything to add to the roster at the deadline, but because of the tax constraints as well, then are we saying that you're not even going to really get in the race here with any of these buyout guides and add another rotational piece? So, yeah, it is what it is, I guess, but disappointing nonetheless. In terms of, let's pretend. Let's go into this hypothetical world where they maybe had have traded Andre Drummond for second round picks, and maybe had they traded Alex Caruso for a number of picks, whether they were first, seconds, whatever it may have been. Does that really dramatically change the floor of this team, William? Does it change the scope of this season, to you at least? I mean, the Bulls are pretty much locked into a 9 or 10, it feels like right now, based on where the variables sit today. But does that dramatically change had the Bulls been somewhat aggressive here and made some moves on the periphery, selling off Drummond and Caruso?
I think that's really the question that this whole thing comes down to, is that clearly they
Yeah.
felt like and so I kind of want to frame this in two ways. One is, like, does the floor of the team change? And to me,
Mhm.
without Caruso, without Drummond, obviously I think you get a little bit worse, but I don't think your like fate is really changed all that dramatically because the teams behind you are just not serious teams, and there's too much space obviously in front of you to really leapfrog anyone anyway. So I feel like it would have been kind of the perfect opportunity to continue to be competitive while also accumulating assets. I think that's why this kind of made such little sense to me. I understand that from their perspective, they probably feel like with Caruso, with Drummond, maybe you can make some noise in the play-in, maybe you can make some noise in the first round of the playoffs. Whereas without them, I don't think that's necessarily the case. So I think that the
Mhm.
ceiling changes, but
Yeah.
I'm not really sure they're really doing much to compete. I think they could win out of the play-in and get into the playoffs. I think a lot would have to go right for that to happen. Just statistically and probabilistically, it's tough to win 2 games in single elimination. But then, like, you're facing the Boston Celtics in the first round. Like, are you? Does not having Caruso, not having Drummond, really change the outcome of that series? Probably not. So I felt like that could have been a good opportunity. But to me, that's kind of the biggest disconnect there is that there's sort of this unspoken unwillingness to, or not unwillingness, but just like disinterest in the idea of assets as something that's valuable. And I think this whole idea of competition and being in the middle does not do much for me. I think most people in the basketball universe feel like this is not a great place to be, but Arturas feels like it is a good place to be and that he can build through it. To me, and we can spend more time on this, but like to me, the big issue there is like if you're going to be in the middle, you got to keep building. And by not doing stuff for 3 straight deadlines, you're not building.
Yeah, see, this is where I differ a little bit in the sense, not on the team building aspect, but in terms of can the Bull or could the Bulls have still been a playing team, sans Drummond and Caruso? I don't think they could have been because I think Billy only really trusts probably 7.5 players right now. You can sort of quibble as to whether he really trusts Javon or Dalen or even Julian. I don't think he really does beyond like a 10-minute stretch here or there. So if you take out Drummond and Caruso, you're having to really lean on those guys to fill those gaps, and none of them can fill the gap that Drummond leads because neither of or those 3 players aren't centers. Maybe you could get some scope to fill maybe 50 to 60% of Caruso's role in a combination of Javon, Dalen, and Julian, plus with more IO minutes and those sorts of things. But I do think, even though that the Hawks and the Nets aren't great teams by any stretch, there's only like a 2-game separation between the Bulls and Hawks in the loss column for 10th currently. There's a 4-game delta between the Bulls and the Nets in the loss column as well. So I do think if you traded Drummond and Caruso, the Bulls had a real chance here maybe to slide to 11th. I don't think they could catch the Raptors down at 12th. Although I don't think the Raptors could catch the Bulls if you want to flip it the other way. But I do think there was a chance for the Bulls to slide out of the plane. And if the goal is to remain competitive to get into the playoffs and see if you can do a thing where maybe you can take the Celtics to a 6 or 7 game series, you can only do that with Drummond and Caruso. You can't do that without them. And I don't think you can even advance out of the plane. And hell, like I just said, I don't even know if you remain in the plane without them just because of the depth issues on this team. So I'm not suggesting that the Bulls should have kept Drummond and Caruso for a play-in race, but I'm saying I don't think there's a guarantee that they remain in the play-in race without those guys. So if the goal is to remain competitive and to try to get into the postseason via the play-in, then I think you can only do that with Caruso and Drummond on the team, which is why they seemingly were so wedded to these guys because they can't achieve what they want to do without him. At least that's my view. I don't think they would stay in 9 or 10th necessarily.
Yeah, that's possible, but they're also going to be getting talent back in if you trade Caruso. Like
Yeah.
you're probably getting a Moses Moody and a Gary Payton or a backup center and some. It's like it's not like your rotation goes down to 6 people for the rest of the season. It just requires you to keep doing stuff, and I think that's kind of
Sure.
the problem is that when you think about this team like making a sell move, it's not just like subtract these players. It's you bring in younger guys that can also probably help you. And to me, I know we kind of talked about this maybe a little bit more offline, but I would much rather see this team fail with like led by Kobe and Io than succeed led by DeMar at this point. And maybe that sounds a little bit backwards, but like the example of that Cavs game, and we'll talk more about this in maybe the second or third segment here, but like the idea that they lost like a close game, but Kobe got really meaningful reps every single time down the court in the final 90 seconds. Like
Hmm.
that matters more to me than winning that game, or maybe DeMar gets that final shot and they win it. I don't know. I just think that should have been the priority, and you can still be competitive while doing that.
Yeah, look, I don't think many people would argue with that. Even me, a Demar guy, I'm not necessarily too. I'm not pushing back on that more generally. So I think that's a fair concept, and certainly agree. And I think it was also a fair counter in the sense that if you do trade Drummond or Caruso, maybe you get the players back and those sorts of things. So yeah, fair, fair. We'll never know. Obviously, what is happening is what will be, and there's still 20 odd games to really figure out what the hell this team will be doing over the next couple months. But we're going to come back and talk more about this beloved Bulls team. But before we do, William, I want you to tell everyone about our beloved Ray.
You want to know about Ray? Because if you are in the market for a new vehicle, we have some great news because our partner, Ray Chrysler Dodge Jeep and Ram in Fox Lake, is celebrating President's Day sales all month long. You know what that means? You will be able to shop presidential savings on their wide selection of inventory. For a limited time, get 20% off MSRP on all remaining 2023 Jeep Gladiator models with the dealer discount. They're number one for new vehicle quality among midsize trucks, says JD Power. And that's not all. Shop their last call on select Dodge Challenger and Charger models. Dodge is the most powerful muscle car brand, so you don't want to miss out on their last call with over 20 Dodge muscle cars to choose from. At Ray CDJR, you'll always be able to shop one of Chicagoland's largest inventories and drive home with more money in your pocket than you'd expect, thanks to the Ray Price Promise. Don't miss out. Shop great deals all month long and save big because Ray CDJR makes buying a new vehicle more affordable than ever. And that's not all. Part two. Just for listening, you can get a free oil change when you mention CHGO at the service center or mention CHGO when you book online at raycdjr/service. But you have to schedule before February 29th. This week, we got the ad right. February 29th, book on raycdjr/service with promo code CHGO. So if you're in the market for a new vehicle, then you have to check out our pals at Ray Chrysler Dodge Jeep and Ram because they're the only ones we recommend. Visit them today on Route 12 in Fox Lake. For more information, visit Ray CDJR in Fox Lake or raycdjr.com, serving the community since 1963.
Thank you, William. And all that money that you save when purchasing a car through our mate Ray, then you can put it towards our mate Charlie the Bacon Guy, who is based out of Woodridge, Illinois. He makes the best craft bacon and bacon jams going around. He's got over 35 different flavors. My God, this dude knows bacon. There's no one in the world that knows more about bacon than Charlie the Bacon Guy. That's why his last name is the Bacon Guy. Naturally cured, preservative-free products. That's what Charlie's getting for everyone here. There aren't any ingredients that he can't pronounce himself that he puts into the process. So unlike most store-bought bacon, this is pure, clean stuff, friends. So if you want to get your hands on some vacuum-sealed bacon that freezes perfectly, throw it in the freezer. This stuff will last up to 60 days in your freezer, a week in the fridge. Like I mentioned before, 35 different flavors. William, I'm not sure what your favorite flavors are. For me, given that I've recently, well, not so recently, but have been a vegetarian for the last 1.5 years, I'm not necessarily going to be purchasing anything from Charlie myself. But having said that, when my mates come over who want to have some bacon like you, William, what type of flavor would you be interested in? William, you're on mute. Casual.
Tell me what they got, and I'll tell you what I want.
Well, look, I mean, there's French toast. That one sounds pretty damn enticing to me. Honey chipotle, Cajun, raspberry chipotle, maple pepper. Like I said before, if you want to throw some bacon jams on top as well, whether it's original bourbon flavored, the mango
You got to try these
habanero
bacon
chili.
jams.
Oh, I mean, like I said before, this dude, he knows what he's
Is it
doing. He
making
knows
you
what he's doing.
reconsider your vegetarianism?
Not quite, but he's tempting me. Charlie's tempting me. And you know what else is tempting me? The fact that I can save 10% on my order when I go to charliethebaconguy.com when you use promo code CHGO at checkout. So if you want to pick up some beautiful bacon, like I said, get to the website, charliethebaconguy.com. You can hit up the website there. Charlie's on Instagram at charliethebaconguy, on Twitter at CZ the CZ, not CZ, CZ, the bacon guy. Email charliethebaconguy at gmail.com, friends, for all those great bacon flavors. Like I said, over 35 different flavors. Preservative free, 10% off when you use promo code CHGO. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, AK. depending on your perspective, I guess. If you're into building from the middle, maybe you are thankful of AK. Do you think? What do you think the Arturas Karnisovas' approval rating is right now? Do you think it's as high as Ray and Charlie's?
I gotta say, my favorite part of being on that press conference was Darnell just coming in super hot and just being like, AK, there are a lot of people that are not a fan of you right now. That was something. But I mean, not great. I think we can all agree on that right now. Like, he's right. I think even if you are going to build through the middle, and let's kind of spend some time here talking about what exactly that means and how it can be done, and if it's even possible, you got to keep building if you're going to be building through the middle. That is a requirement of building. You have to build. But there were a couple of quotes that maybe we can just touch on here from the press conference I thought were really telling. And I know we've kind of hit on them before, but just with respect to this idea of building through the middle and whether or not that's feasible, AK said that, quote, "I'm selling a competitive group that is competing right now for playoffs." And that just evidence of that, you bring up the standings. I mean, we're all bunched up in the middle. So that's what I see with this team at this point. Any adjustments will be made in the future, but this group is really good. So to me, I mean, he's coming out and saying like he's competing in the middle. He's stating very clearly where he is, and he seems to be like not just okay with that, but like happy about that. He said this group is really good, and so that's how he's going to keep doing it. He also said, quote, "We could take a step back, which we don't want. We want to stay competitive. We have an obligation to this organization and this fan base and this city to stay competitive and compete for the playoffs, and that's what we're doing." Mark, what does building through the middle mean to you?
Building from the middle means the same thing as any other method of building, I suppose, in the sense that you need to absolutely nail what you're doing. For me, where it differs is you have less margin for error
Yeah.
for those, for whatever tools or methods you're employing. Because, all right, let's say you're at the bottom, you've got the first or second pick, maybe you make a bad pick. Okay, cool. It is what it is. If that team, it continues to remain bad, that player doesn't influence winning and your team is bad again, then guess what? You potentially could have another number 1 or 2 pick the year after. Hell, if you're the Los Angeles Lakers, where cap space does matter for them potentially, where you have appeal, maybe you don't have to worry about the draft or your trading situation as much as small market teams, whatever it might be. But if you are operating from the middle, you need to absolutely nail what available assets you have. You can't have misses with draft picks. You can't overpay for free agents. You can't put in any deal breakers in those deals whereby a player may move from a half decent play in terms of value to now being undervalued because of their contract situation. You need to nail your trades at the trade deadline, like we talked about before. You need to sell high and potentially buy low in scenarios and get more reward from that point of view. So I guess the impetus is the same regardless, William. The only thing, like I said before, the only thing that changes is you have to absolutely nail things. Now, the Bulls this whole thing could flip in a couple months' time if at the 2024 draft, the Bulls do have a pick in the 2024 draft. If that pick, wherever it's situated, let's just assume it's the 10th or 11th pick, something like that. If that pick was to materialize in the same way or hit in the same way that, a Tyrese Halliburton pick hit for the Kings and has now hit for the Indiana Pacers, then that can quickly flip. Similarly with the Bulls and Kobe White right now. Now, this took a little bit longer, but if you can take someone you draft at the 7th pick and that 7th pick becomes a foundational piece in the way that Kobe has, then that dramatically changes your fortunes as well. You can't have misses though. Like that's the imperative thing. So I think it's possible to build from the middle, to do the thing from the middle, but you're walking a finer line, I guess, or you're threading a thinner needle from that point of view. So if anything, it makes it
Yeah,
more difficult. I don't know if I trust AK to operate within these difficult remits. But yeah, I don't think it's impossible. He's not wrong from that point of view, but I guess there should be no reason for fans to maybe trust that he of all people can do it.
I think that the margin for error piece is a really important one. So obviously, like the biggest criticism that I had when the Bulls underwent their rebuild after trading Jimmy Butler was that they acquired one additional second round pick or a first round pick in 4 years. They traded Nikola Mirotic for the pick that became Chandler Hutchison, which I believe was 21st overall. That was it. When you look at some of these other teams that go to the bottom, and he referenced, you don't want to be one of these teams that, like, you look at all the bad cases of rebuilding. There are bad cases of rebuilding. It does not work all the time. It
Hmm.
didn't work super great for the Bulls,
Yep.
although you could kind of argue that the players did actually turn out pretty well for the most part,
Yep.
even though some of them weren't with the Bulls. Um, but you look at, obviously, like, the Thunder are sort of the poster child of asset management, asset collection. They get
Hmm.
Shea Gilgeous-Alexander as the centerpiece of that trade. They get a bunch of different picks. I think they have 27 total picks over the next 7 years, something like that. Um, they got a pick from the Clippers that turned into Jalen Williams. They obviously had the value of their own pick increase by trading away their good players, but they were still competitive for a year. And then they kind of realized this, like, Chris Paul, Billy Donovan, Shea Alexander, Dennis Schroeder setup was, like, not working, and so they did the real thing. And I think you really have to stick with it. You have to be committed, and that's kind of where the Bulls fell short last time. Was they obviously didn't do a great job immediately putting a roster together that could really set them up. They did not do a good job putting coaches and player development staff in place to help the draft picks that they did have develop. They obviously did not get super lucky in the draft. They were seventh, like, every year, instead of, I think they had, like, the combined worst record in the NBA over that 4 year period. So it takes some luck. It takes a lot of hitting. But when you don't get any additional picks, you're just giving yourself zero margin for error, where you have to hit on every single thing you do. Otherwise, it prolongs the whole thing. If you have 3 picks in every draft and you hit on one of them, you are doing all right. But if you have 1 pick in every draft and you don't hit on it, now you have to wait till the next draft in order to get another chance to hit. And every
Yep.
time it becomes magnified more and more that this guy has to hit. And so even when
Hmm.
you look at, like, the process Sixers, yeah, they drafted Nerlens Noel and Jaleel Okafor and Michael Carter Williams, but it worked out because and Markel Fultz and Ben Simmons. I mean, they went through kind of a lot, but they also did hit on a transcendent super duper star player. And, eventually, maybe that happens, eventually not, but, like, the more chances you have in the draft, the more likely that outcome becomes. And the Bulls obviously did not do that in the post Jimmy Butler era, and they are certainly not doing it now either, where they're still net negative in terms of draft picks. And obviously, they have the Portland one coming in, but that's lottery protected, whereas the pick they have going out is top 10 and then top eight, top eight. So, all things considered, that is technically a net negative in terms of draft assets. So I think it's possible to build through the middle. We can talk about some of the other teams that have done it. Zach Lowe recently wrote something for ESPN talking about teams building through the middle, and he mentioned the Jazz, he mentioned the Pacers, and he mentioned Toronto. And, like, those teams are building through the middle in the sense that they are not bottoming out. But the difference, and I think what makes it completely different, is the fact that there was no foundational change that happened for the Bulls. Unlike with these teams, obviously they lost Fred VanVleet. They just traded Siakam and OG Anunoby, and now they are rebuilding around the players that they got back and Scotty Barnes, who they drafted. The Pacers traded Domantas Sabonis, who was a 2-time All Star when he got traded, and obviously they kind of hit the lottery on Tyrese Halliburton. That is the exception, not the rule. And the Jazz traded Gobert and Donovan Mitchell for, like, 600 first round picks. The fact that they have not bottomed out does not mean that they have not done the things that a rebuilding team does. There was a quote recently via Tony Jones in the Athletic from Justin Zanuck. I'm going to see if I can find it real quick while I'm talking here. But basically, he was saying, like, look, this team is not focused on the play-in right now. They're focused on the long-term success of the team. He said, quote, "All of us want to win," Zanuck said, per Tony Jones of The Athletic, pointing out that Utah has not won more than a single playoff series in a season since 2007. Quote, "But I want to win for a long time. We don't just want to win for a year where we had a good run. The goal is not the play-in or the first round of the playoffs. Those aren't the goals. The goal is winning a championship." And I think if you stay committed to being competitive, you're just never putting yourself in a situation where you have a surplus of assets, where you have a chance to really magnify the value of your own pick, where you have the ability to use cap space to bring in guys via free agency or to bring in guys via trade. The Bulls just have no avenues. And so I think in order to start giving themselves flexibility, and that's why we were talking about maybe it is time to just salary dump Zach, you have no ability to really make any meaningful changes if you're not doing anything at all.
Yeah, and look, I think Indiana and Utah are the best example of this, and annoys me that we're comparing the Bulls to small markets like Indiana and Utah, given the gravity the Bulls potentially have on their hands as a large market team, or the scope that they have to be something a little bit more than what the Jazz or the Pacers could ever be. But those two franchises have been consistently competitive for a number of decades now. And you referenced certain trades they made, but like the way the Pacers were able to acquire Sabonis and was through the Paul George trade. And they nailed the Paul George pick. I think it was pick 8 or whatever he was, however many years ago. But like, because they nailed that Paul George pick, got very good years out of that Paul George run. They nailed the Miles Turner pick. When it was time to end things with Paul George, they then turned that into Victor Oladipo and Sabonis. Both became all-stars from there. They then again pivoted from that point of view where they turned those guys into, turned Sabonis into Halliburton, as you mentioned before. So like they nailed the initial move, but then they continued to nail the moves thereafter. Same thing happened in Utah. You mentioned Gobert and Mitchell, but like that came on the back of a previous era that was concluding. They didn't have the first or second pick or anything like that. I think Donovan Mitchell was the 13th pick. Rudy Gobert was the 27th. So like what available assets they did have, they nailed. They got a good 5 to 6 year run out of those guys that they had in place. But then when it came again time to pivot, they nailed on those follow-on moves, which is the part that the Bulls are missing on right now. Like I think it is possible to build a good, respectable, competitive team out of the middle. But like I said before, you just need to nail it. And I'm reluctant to use Indiana and Utah as the model, not because they haven't done a good job, but I just think that's maybe selling yourself a little bit short from a Bulls perspective. But if that's what they want to do, like there is a way to do it. There is examples to do it, and I think Utah and Indiana have showed us what the best approach or the best way to do so is. But I guess the disappointing thing here is the goalpost moving, William, because when AK was hired, he talked about the Bulls getting back to that championship level status, being one of those organizations that have won titles, that we want to get back to that place. And I think that's part of the reason why people are so, just so over the moon when AK, landed the job. Part of it was his reputation. Part of it was just moving on from Garpax, and obviously that needed to happen. But there was clearly this messaging from the new management team that they wanted to get back to something a little bit more than competitiveness, which is what Garpax were kind of doing previously. But now, as we know, as we keep saying, as we keep using the new C word, AK sort of adopted the same mantra that Garpax had, and is, to be fair, maybe even executing it a little bit worse, which is stunning to even think that something like that is even possible. So to me, like that's the frustrating part, that we had hopes and desires of doing something more. The reason why I liked the Vucevic trade at the time was because it signaled something more. It was a big aggressive move that we hadn't seen in
We're
the previous
building.
15 to 20 years. Yeah,
We're
like you were
building something
trying to
here.
do something substantial. It obviously has stunningly failed, but like the intent behind it, I enjoyed what it potentially signaled or what it meant. Since that time, everything is sort of fallen over because, again, like we've talked about, AK hasn't necessarily nailed everything. The irony of this is what he has nailed is the Kobe White contract, the Aya DeSumo contract, and those sorts of things, which gives us some hope going into the next 20 odd games, but also the years to come. But it still annoys me that the goalposts are shifting to, hey, we want to be a championship level team, to, it would be nice if we could make the playoffs. That's the feel, at least.
Yeah, and obviously the play-in tournament and the inception of that has really changed things, but it wasn't just like we want to be a championship team. It was, okay, we want to build towards championships, and then they start making moves. And then they made the playoffs and they said, we know we're going to make the playoffs this year. The goal is to improve on that. And they missed the playoffs and they lose in the play-in tournament. And now it's, well, we were really close and look what happened to Miami and we were almost, we almost beat them. And so they come into this season saying, yeah, we're going to get back to the playoffs. And now it's like, obviously they want to make the playoffs and he said that, but it was not like playoffs or bust. And I think he said at one point, I'm willing to take accountability for that. But they haven't, because they've just changed they moved the goalpost and changed the expectations to match where the team is. And so you're not taking accountability. You're changing the rules. You're changing what you're saying about how your team is going to function. So to me, it's like there's no one holding themselves accountable there, and nobody is holding them accountable externally, meaning ownership is not. And so, yeah, it just signals. I think Alexander Fackless said that the
Yeah.
situation indicates they're going to be mediocre and plan to stay the course with the Acme regime long term. Yeah, absolutely. And so, if you're going to do it that way, like, fine. I think we can understand that that's the plan. But I think it's fair to disagree with that and fair to try to hold the front office accountable for changing their their whole perception of the team and trying to sell. Like, now they're gonna, if the Bulls make the playoffs, they're gonna say, "Look what we accomplished." It's like, great, you made the playoffs, but that was the goal 2 years ago, and it failed, or last year and it failed, and like, you were supposed to get better. You're back to square one. So I don't see how this is like this sort of just massive improvement and accomplishment here when you are just getting back to the start of what you were trying to build all along, except now, DeMar, who you're probably going to resign at a large number, is much older, and Vooch, you've already resigned, is much older. And so it's this continued um, just investment into a group that is clearly on the downtrend. Like, we went from playoffs to play in, and now we'll see what happens. But they're continuing to commit to that. And I think those things just don't really match up when, even if the goal is not championship, or, the expectation is not championship, like, you still, again, if you're going to build through the middle, you have to keep building. And they keep like referring back to this idea, like, well, when we made the Vooch trade, it signaled to the league that we were like serious again about competing. I just don't think making one trade 3.5 years ago now is signaling anything anymore.
No. No, not when the rest of the league has pivoted so dramatically. Yeah, it certainly doesn't signal that anymore. But like you touched on a point which Alexander, as mentioned in the comments, as has Fish as well. Alexander notes the fact that the Bulls are operating very much like a small market team with a limited spending approach. That is something that Reinsdorf is probably music to the ears of Jerry Reinsdorf and Michael Reinsdorf. So and as Fish notes, like, accountability without consequence isn't accountability. Like, AK can say he's taking accountability, or the goal is what it is, but I don't know if he's necessarily doing his job poorly or wrong in the light of, or within the eyes of those that own the team. And from that standpoint, he might be ticking all the boxes because as Alexander notes, like, they're operating like a small market team. They have a limited spending approach. Like, they're being, quote unquote, for the 19,000th time on this podcast, they're being competitive without having to really, exhaust themselves or exhaust all these resources, certainly not going into tax, doing all those sorts of things. So from that point of view, like, maybe AK is doing a good job. I guess it is all a matter of perspective and who you ask. And, for someone like Jerry Reinsdorf, who has just recently gone to, or is planning to go to Chicago government and ask for $1 billion to rebuild or recreate a new Sox stadium, whatever it might
Yeah,
be.
he
Maybe
doesn't
those
rebuild. He's not rebuilding.
No, he's not rebuilding. He's doing whatever he's doing. But don't get me on that tangent. But anyways, William, let's continue on the conversation. But before we do, tell everyone about Circus Sportsbook, please.
What do you want to know about their tight money lines? They are
Yes.
striving for that solid -110 split on the Circus Sports menu, unlike any other sports books, which use the 115 or -115 or -120 splits. They've got
Wow.
the high app limits and transparency. They don't limit players based on their winnings like every other sports book, and they encourage you to even download and explore other apps to know what those lines are. They've got great customer service with real people who are there to help resolve issues, unlike other sports books who use chatbots. And all aspects of the app are being run by the same team that runs the main Circa Sportsbook at the Circa Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. You're dealing with real people, you're getting great odds, and you can rest assured that you will be getting solid action when you place your bets with Circa Sportsbook. So download the Circa Sports Illinois app at circasports.com/Illinois-app to sign up today. Also, be on the lookout for Circa events, watch parties, and tailgates. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text GAMB, G-A-M-B, to 833-234 or visit areyoureallywinning.com.
I love the Circus Sportsbook app, but if there's another one that sort of is right there with it, William, it is the Game Time app. That is the one-stop shop where you can get your hands on some of the best tickets for, your sporting events. If you want to go to a music show, I'm not sure who's touring in the US right now. There's maybe some good medical. There was a good medical show last night in Chicago, actually, if people went and saw. You guys have good access to a lot of things. Taylor Swift's in Australia actually right now, so maybe I'll head down there and I'll do so via the Game Time app. Maybe I want to get to the comedy show. The Melbourne Comedy Festival is coming up soon, whatever it might be. I'm not sure if Game Time services Australia, but I definitely know it services our friends in Chicago and the US. And that is the place where you can get yourself the killer last minute deals for all in prices. You get your views of your seats. You can use the app to sort of understand where you would be situated in the stadium or the theater, whatever it might be. You can get a view of where you're going to be sitting. You obviously get a view of how much money you are saving on these last minute ticket deals. So if you want to get your hands on some great value, download the Game Time app, create an account, and when you do, use promo code CHGO for $20 off your first purchase. Of course, terms apply as they always do. But again, friends, create an account. You'll download the app, create an account, redeem a 20% off offer using the promo code CHGO. $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, absolutely guaranteed. William, let's close the show. Game Time. Let's close the show with more talk about the depressing Bulls. Did you see Alexander's comment here? Alex is just going off in the comments here. I appreciate you, Alexander. But Will, you are depressing me again, is what he says.
That's what I live for. Look, it's 7:30 on a Friday night. You guys are hanging with us, and I'm just making you guys sad. I apologize.
Hey, that's the state of Bulls. The state of Bulls fandom at the moment.
Well, let's talk about some of the things that are positive, because I think if we're talking about building through the middle, you have to talk about Kobe White and Ayo Dosunmu. And, Brian Windhorst has said on the Hoop Collective a couple of times that the Bulls are rebuilding and they don't even know it. But what if they do know it? Because as we kind of touched on earlier, they kind of had this passing of the torch moment against the Cavs where Kobe was in action on pick and rolls with DeMar for 2 of the possessions, and then he ran pick and roll action after a miss, or maybe it was a made basket, I don't remember exactly, but he was kind of the primary initiator on a play, and then he got the last shot for the first time this year. Obviously, Ayo has stepped into a massive role, and he's playing really well. Like, I think there is an argument to be made, and I'm sure the front office would feel this way, that like with the way that their younger players are developing, and especially the way that they're playing alongside Vooch and DeMar and Drummond and Caruso, that are helping them develop, which I think we both agree with, that they are kind of in this process. That's, I think, the element of building through the middle that the Bulls are getting right. Now, that does not necessarily excuse any of the other stuff of not making trades, of moving the goalposts, of setting expectations at being competitive instead of making the playoffs or making the second round or making championship runs at some point. But at a certain level, like, they're going to need to get to a point where this sort of changing of the guard happens, right? DeMar's 34. He's going to be 35 next year when you re-sign him. Vooch is in his mid-30s now. Drummond, obviously, a free agent. We'll see what happens with him. Zach is going to be 29 next year when he's back. At a certain point, like, this is going to kind of transition over, and I think the idea of keeping DeMar and Vooch around is to sort of bridge that. And obviously, like we kind of talked about, I mean, they're not going to be a team that's ever really accumulating assets along the way like some other teams, but maybe that's okay because of the way that they've developed some of their younger players this year and the strides that we've really seen. I mean, you do have to credit them with the way that they have built up Kobe and Ayo in particular. And Patrick Williams, who was on a tear, averaging 14 points a game in December.
Yeah, and hopefully that's the only tear that's happening with Patrick, and there's no bad news coming or anything of that nature. Again, just to go full doomer mode here. Apologies, Alexander, but yeah, look, I think the Bulls are getting that aspect right. This is what I'm trying to find silver linings when I can, and maybe this is just a defense mechanism, but I think the players and coaches are doing their best, or for the most part, doing their best. I know some people will maybe disagree about the coaching piece. I don't. But I do think the players and the coaches are trying to extract as much as they can from themselves to reach the best they possibly can. I think they're being let down by ownership. I think they're being let down by management. But my angst or ill will to this franchise is not to the players or to the coaches, because I do think on a day-to-day basis they are doing the right thing, as you noted. We are seeing real steps behind Kobe. Ayo is growing. I thought Pat was showing signs. Even Dalen and Julian have shown some interesting things this season. I didn't think Dalen had any capability to do so. I was prepared to write off you two for Dalen already or coming into the season, but he's shown a little bit, not much, but he's shown some signs. So if they can nail that 2024 pick, like I said before, if you can find, I'm not expecting them to find a Kawhi or a Giannis or anything like that, but if you can find someone who potentially could be a fringe all-star with the 10th pick or whatever it might be in the 2024 draft, say what you will about this draft, but there's always players somewhere within any draft, even if
Always.
in perceived bad drafts rather, that break a way that people didn't expect. Like the Warriors are doing that right now, kind of with Pods. Like what they're getting from him, who is now gone into the starting lineup, starting at shooting guard next to Steph. What was he, like this 20-something pick in the draft, something like that? He wasn't a top pick in the
18th, I
draft.
think. But yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Like they are getting a starting level player in year one who's not only impacting the game from a really positive front in year one. Like this dude potentially projects to be something a lot more than what they ever could have hoped for. Like now, obviously, like we said before, you need to nail those picks when they come, and we can talk about whether we have faith in AK to do so. But there's still scope for this thing to work, I guess is the point. And even beyond like the younger guys, there's still scope for you to get out of the financial constraints that you are in. Like this isn't completely lost. I don't think the Bulls are in such a hole whereby there's no way that this thing could turn around and could turn around quickly. Like I said before, you have to absolutely nail your upcoming moves, and they're more important maybe now than they ever have been. And like I said, do we really trust AK to be the one to do it? Maybe that's where the doomerism comes back into it. But on paper, at least, there is a path out of this mess. It's just whether we trust the people that have the ability to walk it to actually walk it. I guess that's the main part. And I don't know how to toggle between those two mindsets, but I do want to give credit to the players and the coaches, because I think for the most part this season, the last 36 games, they have been playing really good basketball on both sides for the most part. So they deserve credit. Like the players and coaches deserve credit. And I want to just make that very clear, because as we've been doing on this show today, but for the last number of weeks, we've been trashing the Bulls, we've been trashing ownership and management, and I think that's fair. But I think also the players and coaches deserve some love too.
So I think this is kind of the crux of what I wanted to get to, which is that, again, I think if you look at this team and what they've accomplished this year, obviously the record and the standings is not what you would hope, but the fact that they've gotten so much growth out of the young players, I do think that is a really positive sign. And I think that kind of puts you in a position now where you don't necessarily have to do a full teardown. Like when the Bulls were 5-14, I was like calling for a teardown because Kobe was not playing well. Io was not in the rotation. It just things were not going well, and the young players are bad. And it's like you need to find some players that you can move forward with, and right now you just don't have that. But they've turned around in such a way that one, I don't think you necessarily need to do a full on teardown, but you obviously still, I think, need to accumulate assets that are going to be on Kobe's timeline. Again, as great as Kobe has been, I'm not at the point yet, and this absolutely could change, but I'm not at the point yet where I'm ready to like call him a franchise player, where he's necessarily like the best player on a championship team. Now, maybe the Bulls aren't trying to compete for championships, and Kobe White can be your best player. That's not like a knock on Kobe. I just think you want to get him help, and like you're seeing him thrive playing off of the best player on the team, which is DeMar. So I think you need to find somebody who's a little bit more on that timeline, and you have some time to do that if you're going to hang on to DeMar and continue on this sort of competitive path this year. But again, like you, at some point, like this is going to end with DeMar, and I just think that you're risking putting Kobe in a really bad position then, where he doesn't have anybody else to lean on, and now he's totally overmatched. Again, that could change. That's maybe potentially not true, but I just think longer term, you need to be thinking about ways to like build a bridge into the next thing. I think you're starting to see the foundation of that with Kobe and Io, and hopefully Pat's a part of that too. We'll see what happens with him. But like at a certain point, this is going to change, and you need to be prepared for that. And we're going to deal with the cap after the season. That just and a third transaction, third trade deadline without doing anything. No accumulation of future assets since 2021. I think there's a way that you can accomplish building through the middle, but it does require you to start to make moves that are building moves that build towards something else. Because right now, this team is obviously not good enough to compete for a championship. I'm not even sure they're good enough to get into the playoffs. We'll see what happens in these last 20 some odd games. I think they can, but I'm not saying it's a given. So you need to start thinking about ways that you can set Kobe up better for the future, because he is now going to be a piece of that. I was going to be a piece of that. What are you giving them to help lean on so that they have a good infrastructure around them beyond the DeMar DeRozan era? And I think sort of this idea of what's coming after this and what's coming out of the other side, maybe they can solve for that when it happens. Maybe, those opportunities come up in the moment and something works out. And, with DeMar, I think the situation was like nobody really thought DeMar was going to end up on the Bulls. All of a sudden he did, and that kind of changed the direction of the team. So maybe those things happen, but let's just wait and see. To me, I worry too much. I'm too anxious to have that kind of approach. And I think you'd want to have some assets in the cupboard ready to go for when that is available. Because the other thing is, you mentioned it, like Kobe's contract right now is an absolute bargain. If he was a free agent this upcoming year, he'd be making twice what he is making right now, if not more. Same with Io. And so you've got these guys on bargain deals. Now is the time to spend and, get guys around them who are more expensive now, and then sort of filter in some of the cheaper guys once those guys age out and once Kobe gets onto his next deal, because you basically have this year and two more with Kobe and Io. Pat's coming up. Lonzo obviously comes off, but like then the Pat thing happens. You don't know what's going to happen with Zach yet. So I just think you have to be prepared for that. I do give credit to the front office for the way that they've managed the books. They've obviously done a good job to keep it under the tax. That's clearly a priority for them, but they've also done well to operate above the cap. And they've gotten guys, last year, I think we felt the same way, where we weren't really sure they had enough space to make any meaningful changes. They got Javon Carter on a $20 million deal over 3 years. They got Torrey Craig. So it's not like they can't do anything. It's just, are you setting yourself up in the best position to be able to maximize assets that you have? And right now, they are tight on cap space. They are tight on draft picks, and they're tight on talent, quite frankly. And so I just think you've got to keep finding ways to accumulate that and, build through your player development staff. That's like something that has been a huge success story for them. We've seen it with Io, we've seen it with Kobe, we've seen it with Dalen and Julian. Like, let's get some more young players in here and try to develop them. I think that's got to be a big piece of it too. But you can only do that if you're accumulating draft picks, and not if you're, sitting on maybe a future first round pick from Portland that may or may not convey, but definitely, they're not going to be tanking next year. So it's like likely that they're going to be out of pick next year. So they have to find a way to get closer to even with that.
Yeah, and like I said before, I think the players and coaches are doing their part. Io's development, Kobe's development, like that is giving. You mentioned a bridge example, or using a bridge, that bridge to get to that next space. Those players and the way they've grown this season are giving AK an out here. If that hadn't happened, to your point, like AK deserves credit for bringing in a Peter Patton. He deserves credit for signing Io and Kobe to the deals he did, and those sorts of things. But at the same time, had these guys not maybe broken out the way they are currently, this would be a much, much bleaker situation. So AK is fortunate that these younger guys are doing their thing. He is fortunate that the coaching staff is enabling and helping grow and develop these players. He's also fortunate that guys like DeMar and Vooch and Caruso, etc., are the type of people who are willing to help these guys grow. I think that is an important thing to note as well. So like I said before, the players and coaches are doing the thing. And now it's up to AK to, as you said, to help, to reward these guys for the effort that they've put in and to set them up as best that you possibly can for that next iteration. The players and coaches are doing their part. Now it's on management and ownership to sort of help these guys, which we'll obviously find out over the next couple months and weeks and years if that materializes. But yeah, why don't we call it a day, hey, William? A tight 45 turned into a tight 60.
As it always does when we are on the call. Just a couple of quick logistics things for everyone.
Yeah.
Obviously, Friday night, like I said, it's All-Star weekend. We really appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Hit the like on the way out, but we'll have a pre-recorded show from Matt and Dave coming on Monday. They've already recorded that, and they're now on vacation, so you guys will hit your feeds on Monday. And then we've got an HQ on Wednesday. And of course, we've talked up Kobe all show. Go check out the CHGO Locker, chgolocker.com. Check out the Sub-Zero Kobe shirt. It is awesome. We also have a sweatshirt now, a hoodie. So check that out. Those are sick. Joey, if we have a picture, feel free to throw that up to show the people what they're missing. Otherwise, yes, we will be back on Wednesday. We'll have the show on Monday. Tuesday, we're out, and then we're back into it with the second half. So we'll be previewing what's to come in the second half and expectations and success and failure and all that stuff. So we're looking forward to it.
There you go. Did you not think that I could hit on that, William? Did you think I was going to miss on all
Well,
that?
I just want to make sure, because I wasn't sure if you'd know what the show schedule was.
Well, I've done my research. I looked into it, mate. So
Okay.
it's fine. But I appreciate you taking the reins there. You know how I feel about
just trying
that.
to be a good friend, you know.
And I'm just trying to be a good friend by giving you shit. But I do appreciate William for joining me today. Of course, everyone on YouTube jumping in the comments. Thank you all for contributing and being part of the show. If you're listening to Apple, Spotify, all that sort of stuff, we also appreciate you guys. 5 stars. Hit the like on the way out at Joey Spouthers. Thank you for producing this show. At Bulls Peck, you can get him there. At Ball Sports, you know where to get Dave too. Like William said, they're back next week. As William and I are too, at Will_Gottlieb on Twitter. I'm at MK Hoops. We are at CHGO Bulls. Thank you for tuning in, friends. Enjoy All-Star Weekend if you do celebrate. Enjoy a week away from the Bulls. I think it is nice to have this little bit of a reprieve, to be honest with you, and have a little bit of a mindset reset. Some of us aren't as fortunate to be in Utah, on the slopes there, the snowy slopes. But some of us are just toiling away in our mundane lives elsewhere. But William, the Goat Gottlieb's living it up, having fun. And I'm hoping everyone else is enjoying their time away too. But thank you for tuning in, everyone. Like William said, we'll be back next week to be talking more about this beautiful, beloved Bulls. Speak then.
We all silly like the mayor.